Hello and welcome to another M&A talk with me, Marcus, and my guest, Nick Pili, who is the head of M&A for businessesforsale.com and focused on the SME. That's the small and medium-sized enterprise, typically between $1 million to $20 million in value. Nick, hello and welcome to the businessesforsale.com M&A talk.
Good morning, Marcus. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm really interested to get into buyers and how they operate, how they think, how they sign up, how they make their first sort of tentative steps towards making an inquiry, the best way that they can represent themselves when making an inquiry, or when a business buyer is presenting him or herself to the seller. What is the kind of advice that typically you would give, Nick, to a serious business buyer making an inquiry?
If a business is valued correctly, sellers are typically overwhelmed with buyer inquiries. So as a buyer, what is it that you can do to stand out? And I think, first of all, it's about getting off on the right foot with having that transparency and having, a great first impression with who you're making that inquiry with, whether that be with a broker, whether that be obviously your first conversation with a seller, or even using, the businessesforsale.com buyer qualification service that we have as well. It's all about presenting yourself right off the bat with a great first impression. Don't forget, we see and brokers see typically upwards of 100 inquiries at any one time for good businesses. So how can you make yourself stand out? So there's certain attributes that obviously you can present us with, in order to do so.
But as a buyer, typically you might be looking at 4, 5, 6 different types of businesses within the same period. Does that mean that you're kind of spreading yourself thin as well, and maybe not showing yourself as a serious buyer in that respect?
Well, I mean, we do see people come to us all the time to say, look, I'm industry agnostic, but what, the attributes are that I'm looking for, my preferred buyer, acquisition profile is that it needs to meet a certain criteria from an SDE or an EBITDA perspective. It should potentially be in this particular regional location. There should be a management team in place, or the selling owner may be willing to stay on and transition for a year or so till I can appoint or promote a new general manager. So, we do, like to see obviously buyers present us with obviously a very good buyer profile so we can understand what they're looking for, just to make sure, of course, that it's a good fit for them, it's a good fit for the brokers that we then present, that particular buyer to. And of course, from the seller's perspective, just to make sure that everything fits. So if you are a buyer, looking to make an inquiry, don't be shocked if, we ask certain questions or a broker asks certain questions about you. What is your industry experience? Now, we typically don't need to see your CV or resume, and certain people do tend to send that to us, but we are more interested in your specific business experience, and certain sellers do have certain attributes as well that a buyer must have in order to perhaps, own and operate that business. Identify if you are looking to become an owner operator, or you do require that management team in place. Of course, that will help narrow the focus, and obviously help us better with that matchmaking process. And identify specifically why you're interested in that specific business, and if that business is located in another region to where perhaps you're currently based. I would also encourage that buyer ahead of time to address why they would want to move to that region, and if they're willing to do so. I mean, if you're based on one side of the country and are looking and inquiring on a business in the other, the first question a seller or a broker is going to say to you is, well, is that person willing to move? How long is that process going to take? And so on and so forth. So as a buyer, be mindful of obviously all the attributes that a particular business has.
Maybe it indicates some buyers don't really know what they're looking for until they start the process. Because what's quite common on businessesforsale.com, from my experience of working with businessesforsale.com over the years, is that often buyers will change their mind halfway through the process. They often think they have their mindset on one kind of business, but when they start doing their research and they start making inquiries and they start finding out more even about themselves, they start to shift their focus to other types of businesses. And actually, it's very rare that a business buyer, from our research at businessesforsale.com, ends up buying the first kind of business they thought they were interested in buying. Is that your experience as well, Nick?
It is, yes, it is, and again, I go back to that sort of industry agnostic sort of perspective. I think there are a couple of attributes, of course, that buyers typically do sort of have at their fingertips. One is their liquid capital availability. How much deposit do you have available that you could put into obviously a transaction? And we always encourage those buyers to provide that sort of proof of funding, whether that be a screenshot of a bank statement or a letter from their fund manager or bank manager, to obviously prove that they have that liquid capital availability. I would also encourage serious buyers, and we do get to see this all the time. They supply us and brokers with a letter of support from their bank or financial institution, indicating how much they could borrow up to. So with obviously the liquid capital, amount, and obviously the lender letter of support, that would then give a buyer a really good sort of indication of sort of the range of sort of transaction that they could obviously look at. And then obviously from there, they can hone in, and start to explore what's going to suit their skill sets. Are they currently working in corporate? Do they want to break away from that? Are they already a corporation and looking for a complementary strategic acquisition to make? To obviously, roll up, into their current business. So, there are lots of, attributions, of course, that go into any sort of one transaction. But to answer your original question, yes, we do see buyers come to us inquiring on, one particular type of business, but often, as you say, refine what they're looking for and end up moving to something else.
And I guess one of the services you provide, Nick, with your sort of connections with the business broker and intermediary community, is finding that business that may not have come to the market yet, which we kind of call like off book, that will be in the network. And that's a service that we would provide at businessesforsale.com via you and your connections. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Marcus. And actually, we, even in the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks, we've actually been instructed by various brokers that there are certain listings that have become available to the market that are literally brand new. Valuations have been done on these businesses. They are off market, and that means they won't appear on the front end of the website. But if you, as a buyer, provide us with your details of your preferred acquisition profile, we then recognize it may be a match, and we can certainly speak to you behind the scenes about those particular businesses, and obviously why they may be suitable for you. And let's sort of obviously recognize as well that when somebody is selling their business, whether that be a small SME or perhaps a lower mid-market business, confidentiality is key for every step of the process. Obviously, people and sellers do not want to alert their staff, their suppliers, their customers, their competition, that they may be looking to sell at this time, which is why certain teasers on the website are very ambiguous, which is why there are certain off-market opportunities as well.
That's very true about the anonymity. And I guess in many ways, you kind of don't want people to know the business is for sale until it's actually sold. And then it becomes a kind of fait accompli and everything goes back into motion again. And the business sort of transfer of ownership doesn't affect the business operation.
Exactly. Yes, 100%.
Nick, another great insight into the M&A process for the SME on businessesforsale.com. Listen, I hope you have a good week, Nick, and thank you again for talking to us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Nick.